So good evening, everyone. So good of you to come.
Good evening.
You got a nice crowd this evening. How lovely. So, we're starting with Rabia's poem, My Poem's Attempt. Haima, would you like to read that poem for us, please? And please read it twice and slowly, please.
Sure, Brother Fitra. I would love to read this. My Poem's Attempt. It's on page 15. All of what I would want my child to know, my poem's attempt. We are infants before each other, are we not? So vulnerable to each other's words and movements. A school I sat in cured me of hurting others. I have come to see that all are seated at his table, and I have become his servant. Sometimes God is too shy to speak in public, and he pinches me. That is my cue to fill in the blanks of your understanding the best I can. One more time, Brother Shankar.
Please.
My poem's attempt. All of what I would want my child to know, my poem's attempt. We are infants before each other, are we not? So vulnerable to each other's words and movements. A school I sat in cured me of hurting others. I've come to see that all are seated at his table, and I have become his servant. Sometimes God is too shy to speak in public, and he pinches me. That is my cue to fill in the blanks of your understanding the best I can. Very nice. Very nice. Yes, God definitely does pinch us. He pinches us every now and then.
Yes.
That's the message we get. Go ahead.
Well, what if someone speak to the point, where's the pivot point in this poem? What is it that she makes a pronouncement in the beginning,
Yes.
and she returns to it at the end, but what's the pivot point?
To me, it seems we're infants before each other. That seems to be the, are we not? We are vulnerable to each other's words and movements. And that often it happens in life. A lot of times, so many misunderstandings by with each other's words and movements. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking in that line of, I don't know whether I'm right or wrong.
It's not, there's no right or wrong. There's no right or wrong. There's just our sense of what the poem is. And I just wondered what people think.
Yes.
She starts off by saying, I want all of what I would want my child to know, my poem's attempt. And then at the end, she says, I want to fill in the blanks of your understanding the best I can. Anybody else got an idea of where this poem, it's what it revolves on?
It seems to me it's or what stands out for me is a school I sat in cured me of hurting others.
That's my sense too, Cindy. That's exactly it.
Because, she's saying I want my children to know these things through my poems. We're vulnerable. We're all little children in front of each other. A school I sat in cured me of hurting others. And just given who this is that's speaking, Rabia, um, she had a lot of rough times with other human beings,
Yes,
other infants,
yes.
and being hurt. I mean, and that's so true of a lot of us, those of us who were hurt, hurt a lot or bullied or whatever, who managed to overcome that are usually more compassionate because of it.
Yes.
And that leads to I have come to see that all are seated at his table and I have become his servant, meaning this is his table, I'm his servant, I'm serving everyone.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
Anybody else got any ideas about this poem? This is a very, mm, this poem says a lot in just a few lines. I'm fascinated by her lines. Sometimes God is too shy to speak in public. It's,
Brother Shankara,
yes, dear.
I also feel that that line, sometimes God is too shy to speak in public and he pinches me, may be where she's pivoting, where in the beginning she wants to express herself through her poems and she has gone through this trauma. She feels that she's a servant of God, but until she gets pinched, she doesn't try to fill in the blanks. After that, she decides to fill in the blanks to the best of her understanding. Maybe before that, she was hesitant to express herself. And then with a pinch, she decided to go ahead and do the best to fill in to best of her understanding.
Mm, well, I like what you say entirely. My sense from the rest of her poems is that she's speaking from understanding with a capital U. So it's your understanding. She's trying to fill in the blanks of our understanding the best she can. Um, she speaks as an illumined soul. I mean, that's just seems to me how it is. I just find this, she has an impish humor. Rabia does. She has an impish humor, and so that's how I hear these lines. Sometimes God is too shy to speak in public, so he pinches me. The very idea that God is too shy to speak in public. Well, that very well may be true. Mhm.
That makes me think though of a child. I mean, there's this whole thing about school and children and sitting at this table. And uh, that sounds like something that a little kid, a shy little kid would do.
Mhm. Mhm.
Sometimes, Bobby's too shy to speak in public, so he pinches me
Right.
for him. So God is like this infant too. It's just this kind of.
Well, that definitely comes through in the poems of others. The child, God is a child nursing at the breast of these saints.
It's an interesting poem for sure.
It sure is. We are all infants before each other, are we not? so vulnerable to each other's words and movements. And then she tells us how she learned that. And as you say, Cindy, knowing a little bit from the bio about her background, that was quite a school of hard knocks that she sat in. It's what we would call it, a school of hard knocks. Anything else from anybody?
Yeah, I just want to say like just like the way that, you know, and I get that it is a translation, so, you know, she wasn't probably thinking of the structuring the syntax of the stanza this way, but just like the opening first stanza, all of what I would want my child to know, my poems attempt. Like, it's just a very kind of like perplexing way to say that to me, you know, like it's like the way that I normally would think of saying, like, you know, my attempt or my, you know, my poems attempt, you know, it would start off with the statement of my poems attempts, you know, to teach all, you know, it's just like and I guess I don't know what definitively like that means to me. I'm just, I guess, wanted to share that. It's just like it catches my eye and it's very perplexing.
Yeah, me too, Liam. And the way I related to it was this: in vaudeville, they say, "Don't give it away. Wait for it," and so save it for the last. All of what I would want my child to know, my poems attempt. So the verb is attempt. So she saves it to the last. And whether Ladinsky did that or she did that, I would bet she did it. I don't think Ladinsky monkeys with that kind of thing, but it caught my eye too, because so that's how I related to it.
Yeah, and on that, yeah, absolutely. And the thing about it that I guess really catches me is that, along with like the title of the poem, is that it is the verb, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, though, like the way that it's used to kind of, for me, right? Like I kind of process it as it like being like, you know, like an attempt, like attempt could also be a noun, right? Like his attempt. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's like a noun describing an attempt. So it just kind of, the way that, yeah, because it's presented this way, like when I listen to it or when I see it, even though I know based on the context that it's a verb, it just kind of like the first instinct for me, it kind of just seems like it's a verb, but it feels like a noun to me based on how it is communicated.
Yeah. Well, it ties together directly with the very last line of the poem. As best I can. Attempt is, you know, our attempt is the best we can. So it's a beauty. But you're right that it did seem a strange construction when I first read it too.
Sorry I'm late. My computer would not allow me to sign in on the other computers, so
Oh, well,
it took me 15 minutes just to get signed in.
Scold that computer, Justine.
I'm about to dump it in the toilet if it were small enough.
So since you joined us, are you feeling comfortable enough to read the next poem?
Oh, I'm always comfortable enough to read the next poem.
Okay. It's If I Did Not Pray.
Yes, if I did not pray. I could not move against this wind if I did not pray, and all that is said of me that is untrue would make lame my gait if I could not free myself from the weight of others' malice. I could not move against all his light if I did not pray. See how things become, what a change can happen when we find a way to keep him close. I can read it again if you'd like.
Please, yeah, we're always reading them twice in the beginning.
If I did not pray, I could not move against this wind if I did not pray. And all that is said of me that is untrue would make lame my gait if I could not free myself from the weight of others' malice. I could not move against all his light if I did not pray. See how things become, what a change can happen when we find a way to keep him close. Since I'm still on the hot mic here, this is one of those poems I kind of glanced over the first time, but it speaks to why I'm so fond of this book, is that it's really not just a bunch of exalted, oh, how holy, how happy I am loving God. This book is full of real struggle and real pain and truth. If I could not move against this wind, all that is said of me that is untrue, could not free myself from the weight of others' malice. I mean, this is, I don't want to speak for everybody, but this is what it's like for many of us. And to hear it voiced in these poems is a great solace.
And particularly when we know her background.
Exactly.
And people did speak ill of her. How dare this, whore. That's what she was, It wasn't by choice. But how dare this whore pose as an illumined soul and dare to instruct others? And so I agree. What a powerful first line that is. I could not move against this wind if I did not pray.
There's a lot of wind right now.
Yes, there certainly is.
And a lot of malice and a lot of untruth. So,
Hey, amen.
and that's not even politics.
No, it's everywhere.
Yeah,
It's the age we're living in. Mm.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm done being dark. We can move along.
No,
Next.
There's such a lightness to your darkness.
Well,
this poem does move from the dark to the light. It
as
does.
well do.
Because it talks, first of all, about what human beings bring that she needs prayer to
Yes.
move against. And then she says, I could not move against all his light if I did not pray.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, those who have had the experience of living with an illumined soul will tell you that it is very difficult to live in the presence of those who have lived with Swami Sridharananda, for example, and who's, by all accounts, an illumined soul. He's head of the work now in Australia and New Zealand. It's difficult to be with them because they are shedding so much light. They are shedding so much. There was a man who came to it was then called the Madras Monastery. And at the time, Swami Brahmananda was staying there. And he was a wealthy man, and he said he wanted to give them all his money and live there. And Brahmananda, this saintly soul, said, well, why don't you just hold on to your money and, stay for a while and see what you think. So after a while, maybe 3 weeks, this man went to the head of the monastery. Brahmananda was the president of the order and was just visiting. He went to the head of the monastery and said, I don't know how you can live here with this man. This is too much for me. I got to go. So he took his money and left. Because, so this is how I read this. I could not move against all his light if I did not pray. So that's how I read those lines.
Kind of makes me think of when Krishna reveals his true form to Arjuna,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like it's overwhelming,
Yeah, it's too much.
but it's not too much for Rabia as long as she prays.
Well, that's what she says. When we find a way to keep
She's
him
tougher
close.
than Arjuna.
Well, it says, see how things become. What a change can happen when we find a way to keep him close. All that equivalent of the wind of malice, the wind of that light. If we keep him close, we're inside the vortex. We're in the eye of the storm. This is, and I certainly agree with Justine, very, very much agree with Justine, that it is a treasure to find among these illumined souls these things that we can so richly identify with as truths that we've experienced and are experiencing. Anybody else got anything to say? I'll rattle on and on.
It sure does help when we have so many things going against some days, and doing like extra meditation, keeping God closer to us really, really helps a lot. I know many people can agree on that. You just find peace within you, and you can overcome so many storms.
Yes.
I feel that. I felt it before, and I experience it all the time, and just keeps me calm and keep moving.
Good.
Always
Keep
go
moving, yes.
circumstances like this lady had gone through more than any one of us had gone through, probably. I am sure there are many like her, I know, but she expresses her pain so clearly in this poem.
Yes.
Pain, and then how she kept God closer to her heart. That's the one way of her survival, the great way of survival.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Brother Shankar.
Brother Shankara, she
Yes.
makes me, this is McKaylee.
Yes, hi, Michaela.
I have to agree with Haima, because to me, she, instead of hating the person that was paying for her to perform a service of being a prostitute, she might have looked at that person and just looked at being able to see their pain, but also to see the God within that person. And so that person brought her to her enlightenment. That person was her Christed person. So she saw the pain, and then in that you can forgive the person, and she's caught in this situation, so she just she reversed it and was able to look at them as a blessing then, because she saw the God in them. And since we're all of one mind, she might have even, the person that was paying for her service might have even kind of turned it around and got touched in some way when they left there, that, and they weren't for sure what exactly happened, what touched them in a certain way. I mean, it could be that. I was just thinking.
Well, we find it's a couple, three more poems along. We find her speak directly to that, Michaela. We find her speak directly to that. So I won't give it away, but it's truly a remarkable poem. Anything else to say about If I Did Not Pray? Okay. Oh, this next one. This is one of these things where you find her sense of humor. Michaeli, do you have the book? Do you have the book? Can you read the next poem? Trying to work.
I don't have the book. I ordered it, but it hasn't
Oh,
arrived.
okay. All right. Liam, would you like to read this one?
Yes, certainly.
I think you will be able to capture the humor. You're a good reader.
Trying to work in. Once I heard two camels talking. They were complaining about all the weight they had to carry when they crossed the desert. And they were especially peeved about that new camel whose only load was the master's young daughter, who would often pet the camel and even sing to it sweet songs, while they had to often feel the whip of men and listen to them tell crude stories of romantic exploits. An older camel was overhearing the chat, and as I was, and spoke, saying, "You know, it is our habit to bite when we are grouchy, and just yesterday I saw you snap at a man who whipped you. Maybe you shouldn't bite. Maybe the master has two daughters who sing and pet. And although this may be stretching things a bit, I am reminded of some words of wisdom I have been trying to work in somewhere for days. Those who are trusted by others, God trusts."
Mhm. So you want to read it over from the beginning?
Absolutely. Trying to work in. Once I heard two camels talking. They were complaining about all the weight they had to carry when they crossed the desert. And they were especially peeved about the new camel whose only load was the master's young daughter, who would often pet the camel and even sing to it sweet songs, while they had to often feel the whip of men and listen to them tell crude stories of romantic exploits. An older camel was overhearing the chat, as I was, and spoke, saying, "You know, it is our habit to bite when we are grouchy. And just yesterday, I saw you snap at that man who whipped you. Maybe you shouldn't bite. Maybe the master has two daughters who sing and pet. And although this may be stretching things a bit, I am reminded of some words of wisdom I have been trying to work in somewhere for days. Those who are trusted by others, God trusts."
Thank you, Liam.
My pleasure.
This is what I mean about Rabia's delicious sense of humor. Anybody got anything to say anything about this one?
This reminds me a bit of when Christ says to turn the other cheek, in a way.
Mm-hmm. Why does it make you think of that, Aaron?
Well, I mean, I don't think that's the entire message of this poem, but this one part when he says not to bite.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and the implication being, and he's the old camel says it directly, you know, maybe the master has two daughters who sing and pet. There is, as ye sow, so shall ye reap. And so, yeah. Thanks, Aaron. That's good.
A friend of mine once said, we're not judged by how we handle good people, we're judged by how we handle assholes.
Well said. Well said, yes. Yeah, it's easy to deal with good people. It's those who give us grief that, and I just think it's just so funny. She says, I've been trying to work this in for days. She says, I'm reminded of some words of wisdom I've been trying to work in somewhere for days. Those who are trusted by others, God trusts. No, that's a sweet message indeed.
I'm not sure I understand exactly the end of the poem of God trusting those who are trusted by others, because doesn't God trust us anyways?
Well, I'm somebody else have a go at answering that. That's a good point. But
My understand,
please.
okay, my understanding there, those who are trusted by others, God trusts. Suppose you trust me, God is within you too. So that means God is within all of us. If you trust me, that means God is trusting me too. So you have divinity within you. That's how I understood, Brother Shankar. So everybody has divinity within, all of us have divinity within each of us, our conscience.
And if I'm not trustworthy,
And even then, still God loves us,
may love us.
but may not trust us,
Yes.
right?
That's what I
I
think.
think you've made it clear. Yeah. So
Exactly.
go ahead.
Yes. He
Who
loves.
else was speaking? Cindy?
That was I. Yeah, I was agreeing. I think God loves us, but God doesn't trust all of us.
That's right.
Otherwise, she would have given us free will.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
I love that. I've been trying to work this in for days. So it's
Yeah.
like this camel, the old wise camel's been hearing the younger grouchy camels chat and was just waiting for an opportunity to say, hey.
Yeah, right.
And
And
what? Go ahead.
go, no, you
I
go.
was going to say little things that reminds us of, like Aaron said, to turn the other cheek and these different things. And I was reminded of you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. You know, that those kinds of cliches that, but that it can get difficult too because it's talking about biting somebody who whips you. And, you know, there are cases of somebody, I don't know, not biting someone who's whipping you doesn't always help or change the person who's whipping you's behavior. So, but ultimately it's about us, and it's about there was a camel probably that had been whipped but didn't bite, and the master saw that and said, okay, that one's the one that's going to carry my daughter,
Mhm.
because that one is self-controlled and self-contained and is controlling its mind, so to speak,
Mhm.
conquering itself.
I liked Aaron's connection with Turn the Other Cheek.
Yeah.
I think that was a good connection. This was all these people, all these saints, they knew about Christ for sure. Hafiz mentions it specifically. And the old camel, he doesn't set himself apart. He says, it's our habit, our habit to bite when we're grouchy, which I guess is true of camels.
It's true of all of us.
Exactly.
I think the old camel is just an old anything, an old,
Right.
more experienced.
Mhm.
That's the thing, more experienced. This camel has observed, okay. It's our habit, it's our nature or habit to bite when we're grouchy, but I have seen maybe the master has two daughters.
Yeah, right.
I also see the meaning, Brother Shankara. Whipping only makes other animals or human beings, they make more aggressive. So whipping doesn't help. Even for children, it doesn't help. Even for us, it doesn't help.
No.
So it only makes the person aggressive, animals aggressive more. So that there is a lot of psychology there in that. Very, very.
Anything else about this particular poem?
I think it's important to not see the message as necessarily that we'll get rewarded if we don't bite, because I think you could possibly take that away, but I'm trying to figure out what would be the deeper message.
Well, the deeper message is right at the end of the poem, absolutely. There's the carrot. Maybe you shouldn't bite. Maybe the master has two daughters that sing and pet. But then the deeper message, as you put it, I think, is at the end of the poem.
Yeah, I kind of on that note of this deeper message at the end of the poem with it about trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been to a zoo one time where they had camels, but I've never had to ride camels or rely on camel transportation anywhere. So I don't know if this is true, but I've always had this impression of camels, particularly in the Middle East and whatnot, being used for such expeditions very frequently because they were viewed as like trustworthy creatures for such, for rough adventures. They could go long distance. They weren't, at least from, according to this poem, I know this is a poem, I guess they could be a little bit grouchy and get a little violent, but like for the most part, they were kind of tame and reliable animals. So I just find I find it's interesting that the animals that are being used for this example and for that message are camels, because I mean, at least like I said, from my impression of what camels always were that they were very reliable and trustworthy creatures. So I just find it's kind of an interesting, and I may be wrong. If somebody knows more about camels, please enlighten me. But that was just kind of always my impression of, a trait of a camel. And about trustworthiness and reliability. So I think it's interesting that they are, here she's talking about camels who are demonstrating a lack of trust or reliability or faith.
Well, there is a saying in Islam: trust Allah, but tie your camel to a post. So.
And camels are grouchy. They're like llamas. They'll seriously spit at you. I think the thing about camels is that they're tough and they can go long, they're strong and they can be trained, but they're not really what you'd call docile. I mean, they're reliable and they're strong and they're trustworthy in that sense. But from what I've heard, I don't have firsthand experience, but I have heard people who have, they really can be grouchy and nippy and,
Yeah,
it's best to be nice to them.
that's what I've read too.
Yeah.
Brother
Same with,
Shankar, I'm not.
Yes, Catherine.
Was Cindy going to say something still? Didn't want to cut her off.
I think she was through.
I'm reminded of the book Kinship with All of Life and the fellow who expresses, that oneness with all of life. And I think that the trust goes both ways. When the camel's wooed and loved, it's automatically more gentle. And when it's whipped and hearing crudely treated, it's automatically a bit more grouchy. And we're that way too.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
I have a couple of thoughts. One is that one has to trust oneself before one can be trusted by others. And so maybe if one trusts oneself, then you will know when you should bite and when you should not bite. That's one thing I'm thinking. The other thing is there a difference between just yesterday I saw you snap at that man who whipped you. So the camel just snapped. And then she says, maybe you shouldn't bite. So that reminds me of his but don't bite, that snake story.
Mm-hmm.
So you just snap, but then maybe you shouldn't bite. And then the master might then think you're less prone to causing harm and might let your daughter sit on you.
All those are wonderful thoughts, good thoughts. These poems, like this is what I said earlier, there are no right answers to a poem. There's a poem is deliberately provocative. A good poem is always deliberately provocative. If it has a pat answer, that isn't going to work. So good. So all of that. And what you started with was particularly strong. You have to trust yourself before you are trustworthy. If you can't trust yourself, others will not trust you. Good. Well, I'd like to read this next poem myself. It's called Cherish Myself. I know how it will be when I die. My beauty will be so extraordinary that God will worship me. He will not worship me from a distance for days. Oh, I'm sorry. He will not worship me from a distance. For our minds will have wed. Our souls will have flowed into one another. How to say this? God and I will forever cherish myself.
Beautiful poem.
Cherish myself. I know how it will be when I die. My beauty will be so extraordinary that God will worship me. He will not worship me from a distance, for our minds will have wed. Our souls will have flowed into each other. How to say this? God and I will forever cherish myself. And notice, those of you who have the book, myself is capitalized. And this is exactly what Krishna says will happen when you die, if you die in that consciousness of the divine. Our minds will have wed, our souls will have flowed into each other. And then so beautifully said, how to say this? God and I will forever cherish myself. As Hafiz says in one of his poems, each soul completes me. That's God speaking. Each soul completes me. I love how she opens this poem. I know how it will be when I die. My beauty will be so extraordinary that God will worship me. That radiant being that is the truth of ourselves. So extraordinary, so beautiful. So Justine, this is one of those poems you were saying you were glad there were other kinds of poems than just these in the book.
Well, this one has that in it too, though, because what I see in it is the struggle, the desire to be that beautiful by the time you die, and acceptance of the fact that I may not be that now or feel that way now. So I still see in it a striving and yearning to become the beauty that you know is your full potential.
Oh, beautifully said, Justine. Exactly.
I was feeling that too, because it says, I know how it will be when I die, rather than this is how it is now with God and me. And it almost makes me a little sad that it's like she has to wait till she dies to feel that God and I will forever cherish myself, capital M. I mean, because she knows that's true now, or she wouldn't even be able to write this. But she's not quite in that yet.
Perfectly said, Cindy. We flow in and out of this. This is exactly what Adi Shankaracharya says at the end of that beautiful book, Crest Jewel of Discrimination.
Mm.
That we and it just as Justine said, and you said, it's not present every moment now, but she knows it will be that when she no longer has this world machine to deal with.
I also think when short poems, every word is meaningful, more meaningful. He will not worship me from a distance. The word distances or from a distance, that's really important because that's what this is all about. I'm at a distance. We are, God and I, there's still this distance. And here's how it will be when I die. Our minds will have wed. Our souls will have flowed.
Right. There will be only one at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But now there are still two from a distance. Well pointed out, Cindy. Anybody else got anything on this one?
Yeah, it's really interesting how, yeah, like everyone shared about the, I guess, impending sense of this divine union occurring. And it's interesting because, like, in some ways, I kind of see it as it, it hasn't happened yet, but the fact that she knows that it will happen, right? And she says it with such certainty. It's like she says, "I will," but she doesn't just say, "I will." I mean, she does use the word "will" a lot, but she uses the word "will have," right? So it's kind of like she's already, so even it's like kind of like she's looking, she's kind of in the future looking back at what will have happened, right? It's like a prophecy of sorts. Like she's like saying that, this will like she's saying it with such conviction and certainty. It's like almost as if like, I guess like it, because like, I mean, like, I guess the point I want to make is, I know in the body we we see things in temporal time, right? But the thing that I've heard a lot is that the spirit is atemporal, right? And so like kind of just like this vision that she has of the of this happening, even though I guess it hadn't literally happened, she was writing this poem. It's kind of like with that level of trust and certainty. It's almost, I mean, I'm just kind of imagining now, but like I feel like she is kind of like beginning to realize it as she writes this and looks ahead. So it's kind of like it has happened, right? Even though it hasn't happened. I know that's kind of a weird.
Well, you've just exactly hit on it, Liam. The scriptures of all the traditions tell us that we can attain union with the divine while still embodied, but that it's practically impossible to maintain it, to keep it. As Sri Ramakrishna said, you cannot keep your voice always on the highest note. He sang the Hindu scale. It's kind of like ours, but it's different. And he said, you cannot keep your voice always on the highest note. And so we experience this divine union, this divine presence, this living presence, but then we slip away from it again and this is why all of these saints talk about their struggle and their tears and their why the reality of their life is here, as well as the future possibility is here. But as you said, Liam, and it's so, and in my opinion, one of the reasons I like this poem so well is because of her certainty. I love these opening lines. I know how it will be when I die. And so it's yeah.
And just kind of like one thing like that I was saying, talking before, it kind of came to me how I want to say it. It's, like with her use of the words or the phrase "will have," it's like she's looking at these future events as if they were in the past. And it's just like really, like Cindy said, it's such a short poem, but there's so much going on with it. It's just really unbelievably beautiful.
Yeah. And as so correctly said, that in these short poems, every word counts. Every word. There's no spare change.
Yeah,
Anything else? Anyone?
I think that when you've been seeking for a while, meditating, looking inside, you eventually become aware that your realized perfect self is an existential reality. And you can see that higher self at every turn. And this poem is so much, it's not so much about union with God as it is also about realizing that that fully realized self that is there at every moment. And, you know, we may see it in glimpses, but we're just not fully there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just a reiteration of things that have already been said, but that's okay.
No, that's fine. Exactly. And you know, something remarkable, you know, over and over, we've heard this in various ways in the various traditions. Something truly remarkable happens when we leave this world machine that we're in, this action and experience machine that we have. So, and so she asks, she says this tentatively at the end, because she knows it's impossible to express how to say this. God and I will forever cherish myself, capital M, myself, the part of us that is indwelling in this world machine, but is not the world machine.
So, so as you say, when she says myself, she's not really, because the entire time through this discussion, I've been imagining like her so-called experience suit as her identifying with herself, but she's talking about her real self.
Yes, that's how I read it anyway. That's why the M is capitalized at the end of the poem. How to say this: God and I will forever cherish myself.
I see one thing in this poem too, in another way. I see it in Brother Shankara. No matter how much she was hurt, her physical body was hurt by people, but her soul was never hurt. It stayed so pure, so pure. She was always with God. That gave her that resilience, inner resilience to overcome all this abuse and poverty, all the things that she went through in her life.
Yes.
She stayed so pure with the divinity, seeing God all the time, everywhere, within herself and everywhere.
She actually speaks to that in one of these poems, that through all of that, you know, something remained pure. Something was never soiled. Something was never soiled. Well, it's 9:03, dear ones. So we'll start next Monday with the poem Jealous of a Pond, which is again one of those poems that just shows her wonderful sense of humor. So good to have been with you this evening. Any final words from anyone? I think Swayam left us to be part of that Vedanta Life Academy that she's attending. So she's no longer with us. Anything left? Okay. So we'll just leave it with this. Amen. 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 Peace, peace, peace be unto all of us. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. So good night, everyone. So good to share this with you. It's really lovely. From here, it is really lovely to share these poems with you and to hear everyone talk about their experience of these poems. I've been treasuring this book since I first came across it, and it's so good to have you sharing it with all of us who come and do this. So good night.
Good night, Brother Shankara. Thank you.
For those of you who are interested, tomorrow night we'll study the life of Sri Sharada Devi, Holy Mother. On Wednesday night, we're just coming right to the end. We're going to study chapter 17 of Bhagavad Gita. And then Saturday, there's a class at 11 a.m. on Realizing God, the talks of Swami Prabhupada. And then on Sunday, because the next day is Yom Kippur, the talk will be on a Jewish saint's teachings. It's called Baal Shem Tov and the Practice of Love. So that's what the rest of this week is going to be about from on the Zoom from here. So good night, everyone.
Good night, Brother Shankara.
Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga Durga Durga. Go in Mother's loving and protective embrace. Jai Shri Krishna Jai.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Jai Yesu Deva, Jai Yesu Deva, Jai Yesu Deva. Good night, all.